Hi everybody, Julia from JustOneMoreCard.com, and today I want to show you how you can color quite vibrantly on Kraft cardstock with your Copic markers. This is a technique I am rediscovering and I'm just having a blast with it. So basically the trick here is, and I've mentioned this previously, so check out other videos or blog posts that like on my blog, I have a tag that says Copic on Kraft. So by clicking that tag underneath this post, which I link to, you can see all the projects I've done with this technique. So basically what happens is when you apply Copic color, which is an alcohol ink, to Kraft cardstock, at first it looks pretty bad, mostly. And then when it dries, it actually becomes much truer to its real color. So the trick with Copic markers, and I guess with other alcohol-based markers, is you have to let it dry first to understand how the color will actually look like. Now this is, ignore this part here because the ink is basically, this marker has basically run out of ink. I have to refill it. I'm just too lazy right now because I'm in the middle of my move. By the time you're watching this video, my first move will be over and I'll be preparing for my second one. But basically you're doing the same thing as you're doing with, regular Copic coloring on, white paper. You just blend either from light to dark or from dark to light, whatever you like best. No, there's no right or wrong, whichever technique you prefer. And that's the same thing that you do on Kraft paper. The only difference there being that the ink lightens over time. And what I've done, and I've linked to this on several of my other blog posts with this technique, is that I just grabbed the Kraft cardstock that I use most often, and I scribbled just a tiny circle of color with every Copic marker, and then labeled the colors. And that helps me to understand how the color will look like when it's dry, so I'm using that as a reference sheet. And here you can see it quite well. When the Copic marker dries, right now it's wet, but once it dries, it becomes almost invisible here. So I was like, okay, I probably need to go in with another marker to deepen this up because otherwise there will be no shadows. And I think this is a really good example to see how the color changes or becomes truer to itself over time. Then to add white highlights, I grabbed my white pencil. It's a polychromos pencil, but you could also use a Prismacolor pencil, doesn't really matter. Maybe you have another colored pencil that is white, just try that one. And I'm adding the white here because I don't know any other way to get white onto the Kraft cardstock. And then I've added like a little faux highlight here and there and just smoothing this out with a dry paper stump. And then I'm going through the trouble of adding white highlights to some of the berries here. And I'm just adding a tiny little bit of white because I don't want to mute the underlying color, and then blending this out. And then at the very end, I went in with a darker brown marker just to intensify some of the shadows because they seemed too weak for my taste. So here's a close-up of my coloring. You can see that the color went a little bit outside of the lines. You have to test your own Kraft cardstock, how much color feathers or bleeds through. As with white paper, every Copic paper is different, but before you run off and buy something expensive, just try whatever you have on hand, and I'm pretty sure it will work out because the Kraft cardstock that I'm using here is also a no-name cheap cardstock. These stamps are by Purple Onion Designs, and I've also linked to them in the video description below. If you have enjoyed this video, I'd love if you would leave me a thumbs up. It always means a lot to me to see that you like my videos. And if you like, also subscribe to my channel because there's a lot more fun videos to come. Cheers!